My name is Dave Scott, Manager of Work Solutions here at JobsFirstNYC. Thank you to all our panelists and again to Liz for a very dynamic conversation. We have the privilege today of welcoming some of our friends from Georgetown University's Center on Education and the Workforce, which since 2008 has researched jobs, skills, equity, and more to inform students, parents, teachers, and policymakers about changing relationships between education and careers. We rely on their research to inform our work and are grateful that they're joining us here today to discuss their latest series, The Uncertain Pathway from Youth to a Good Job. Over the past several decades, the pathway to a good job has become longer and more challenging for young adults to navigate. Further, the disparities in good jobs by race and ethnicity and gender persist. To secure a good job, young adults need more education and high quality work experience than is necessary for previous generations. But three hurdles stand in the way, including the rising cost of post-secondary education, limited access to high quality work-based learning, and the absence of comprehensive counseling and career navigation services. To discuss the report's findings, I bring you Katherine Hazelrigg and Artem Gulish from Georgetown University. And I will tell you a bit more about them. So Artem Gulish is a senior policy strategist and research faculty at Georgetown CEW. His areas of research include youth policy, pathways to good jobs, race and ethnicity, gender, and economic equity in education and the workforce. He's been at CEW for over 10 years and contributes regularly to CEW's prominent research, featured in the Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and many other sources. Katherine Hazelrigg is the Director of Strategic Communications and Production at CEW. And in her role, she leads its communications portfolio, including media relations, developing and executing communication strategies, devising rollout plans for report releases, and overseeing the website and digital media efforts. So thank you both for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having us. As Dave said, my name is Artem Gulish, and I'm also originally from Ukraine. And before we get started, I want to just ask for a very brief moment of silence for all the tragedies that have happened in my childhood homeland this year, and quite frankly, in many other parts of the world. Thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Katherine to talk a little bit about the center and this project.
Good afternoon. I'm Katherine Hazelrigg, and I'm very pleased to be here today. The Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce is a research and policy institute that's housed within the McCourt School of Public Policy at Georgetown University. We study the links between education, career qualifications, and workforce demands, and we are fortunate to operate within an environment of complete academic freedom. Our 6 primary areas of work include state and local analysis, economic and racial justice, education and workforce policy, non-economic value of higher education, the economic value of credentials and competencies, and job projections and education requirements in different industries, occupations, and geographic areas.
Thank you, Katherine. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this project. So we looked at youth pathways into good jobs and how they have changed over time, specifically between the older baby boomers and the older millennial cohort. And just before we get into that, let's cover a bit of a definition here of how we are looking at good jobs. Of course, job quality is a wide topic and encompasses many things, including benefits and flexibility and autonomy. Unfortunately, many of those things are not available in many of the data sets, so we are using earnings as a proxy for the overall job quality. And the way that we are defining it is that a good job pays at least $35,000 for workers younger than age 45, and at least $45,000 for workers ages 45 and older. At the median, that's about $57,000 for workers 25 to 35. This is also varies substantially uh, by uh, across different workers. So while this is the minimum is 35, a quarter of good jobs for people born between 1981 and 1985 paid from 35,000 to 45,000, while another quarter pays more than 80,000. And this also varies across the country because cost of living is very different, and we have adjusted, these numbers have been adjusted by cost of living, so which varies from about 29,700 in South Dakota to 47,400 in Washington, D.C. So when we look at this, we see that the pathway to good jobs has shifted, whereas many of the baby boomers have had a good job in their mid-20s. Millennials do not get to a good job often. Older millennials have not been able to get to a good job until age 30 or later. And this has had a variety of implications, including for their financial security, for family formation, for their living arrangement, and for society broader in terms of what it takes to prepare young people, in terms of the status of young people in society. And there is also has, while after age 30, as you can see, millennials have actually done better. It has significant implications for people who are not able to make that transition. And the longer transition also has implications for young people's financial security. If you look by education level, we see that only people with bachelor's degree or higher, only young adults with bachelor's degree or higher have consistently done better in the millennial cohort compared to the baby boomers, whereas for others, especially during the 20s, they have not done as well. For when we look by gender, we see that while women have done better more recently, so the millennial women have done better than the baby boomer women in terms of the share with a good job, they still fallen substantially behind men. So while men, on the other hand, we see that the young men in the millennial generation throughout the 20s and even into the early 30s are not securing good jobs at the same rate as the baby boomer generation. There are also major equity gaps by race. We see that many of the while many of the young white adults are making it and are performing even in their 20s pretty close to the previous generation, to the baby boomers. We see that for African Americans, it's majority do not reach a good job until age 34. And for young Latina or Hispanic adults, majority do not attain a good job during this time at all. Ages 25 to 35 do not attain a good job at all. Now, in addition to the education, people's major and occupation we find that those make a big difference. So people who major in STEM tend to do better than people who major in liberal arts, and people who work in STEM tend to do better than people who work in healthcare support or food and personal services. And the elements that are involved here include one, the education has gotten substantially more expensive over the generation. And two, in many entry-level jobs, good entry-level jobs now require at least some work experience, and there is a lack of high-quality work-based learning for many young adults, especially those without bachelor's degrees. And the third is that we find that the relationship between education and labor market has gotten much more complex, so that traditional views of just going to college is not sufficient, and young people need more career counseling in order to guide them to make choices in this much more complicated career pathway environment. And most schools do not have enough career counselors and do not enough counselors, and even though they have counselors, they only spend a portion of their time on career counseling. So many young people, especially from marginalized backgrounds, do not are not able to get the kind of guidance they need to make those choices. In addition, all of this has had a major impact on young people's financial security. So when we look at this, we see that back in 89, 15% of young people, households led by young people 25 to 35 had educational debt, and the median debt was about 8,000. But by 2019, the share of young households with educational debt has grown to 43%, and the median debt has grown to 26,000. And this is not equally distributed either. We see there is significant gaps in terms of both the share of young people who have debt and the median amount of debt, with Black African American women particularly being most likely to have to take out student loans and having the highest student loan debt amount at their own every level of education. And this has an impact on their financial well-being. We see that there is just very major gaps in net worth, with white men with bachelor's degree or higher having median of 36,000 net worth, whereas Black women, even with bachelor's degree or higher, have only $900 in net worth, and this in part this is due to discrimination, which works through multiple channels, including direct labor market discrimination, but also constrained choices in our society. People do make choices, but those choices are often constrained by cultural expectations, by social expectations, by family expectations, by how they are treated by the system and by the people who guide them, the signals they're given in terms of what they're good at, what they're not good at, what they can anticipate to attain. And this is the outcome that that is the result that many young people are now have less financial security, and in particular by race and gender, and by race and gender combined, especially we see this major gap. Okay, I'm going to now turn it over to Katherine to discuss our recommendations.
Thank you, Artem. So our 7 recommendations for comprehensive reform are the following: to embrace our country's diversity and reject racial, ethnic, and gender injustice, including through investments in culturally responsive teaching and counseling. 2, to apply an equity lens to all policy and programmatic reforms by measuring inequality and crafting policies and programs designed specifically to address it. 3, to provide targeted wraparound educational and social supports to young people from cradle to career, including universal pre-kindergarten and equitably funded public schools. 4, to invest in programs that treat education and labor markets as a single system, extending from early childhood to the first good job, including those with strong employer involvement. And 5, to help young people, especially those who are most marginalized by the education system, pursue and attain their education and career goals simultaneously using career exposure and work-based learning. 6, create a transparent data-based education and career navigation system that is accountable for making outcomes more effective and equitable. And finally, to make college more affordable and more convenient by investing in free college, incremental credentialing, community college baccalaureate programs, and better transfer pathways. And if you're interested in more information on the reports, the URL on your screen is the best way to find us. You can also connect with us via social media. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to have a bit of time for Q&A, including some audience questions. So again, if anyone has questions, please put them in the Q&A section. Starting off with key sort of overall question. You recommend investment in programs that treat education and labor markets as a single system, childhood to first good job, career pathways like those. Jobs First has been working towards for years, and they're viewed more favorably these days. What would it take to create data-driven education and career navigation systems in terms of funding, political will, other things necessary to make it happen?
So there is, I think, more and more of a bipartisan view that having more data about educational outcomes is good. There has been, for a number of years, there have been across both Democratic and Republican administrations, there has been investment into data systems that capture both the outcomes and the different metrics of experience throughout secondary and post-secondary education. What has been missing is the interconnectedness between them and the real effort to create guidance that is friendly for students and families, because the complexity of all this information has become quite significant in recent years. The relationship between education and the workforce demand is not as simple as it used to be, and really that's where more effort, I think, would really help to sort of interconnect, to have more partnerships between K-12 post-secondary and the employers and workforce development organizations, and for the government to create tools that are more user-friendly, that people can understand, and also publicize those tools, as well as promote career counseling and career guidance, people who are trained in providing that. Katherine, do you want to add anything?
Just to follow up on the career counseling point, I think students aren't able to make fully informed decisions about their educational and career pathways without sufficient guidance. The American School Counselor Association recommends a student to counselor ratio of about 250 to 1. But the current national average is almost 70% higher than that at 424 to 1. And that is an average. So there are schools where that ratio is much, much higher. And I think that's one area where we really need to put a lot of effort and focus.
Thank you. How can a transparent data system, multiple senses of the term, for education and career outcomes create the best odds of success for young adults as they age? And what's your specific advice for both students and for those guiding them? Again, multiple senses of guidance.
So the advice for students and for their families and guidance counselors is essentially we have some tools that are becoming available. The college scorecard is sort of the most comprehensive national effort recently, and different states have their own tools that they provide. Virginia, for example, has Virginia Wizard. So one thing is to find the tools and use those tools to try to maximize their opportunity to find options that are both match the students' interests and abilities, as well as the potential for a successful outcome. And at the same time, realize that students don't necessarily, we can't necessarily expect students to be perfect rational decision makers. I think people, when they, especially for young students, they still don't necessarily have the experience and the perspective sort of what it's really, what they want to do, was really like to be involved in a certain career. So offering them that kind of perspective, and as well as flexibility to explore different options, to have work-based learning experiences, that would be really helpful. Katherine, do you want to add anything?
I think you pretty much covered it.
Okay.
So that then leads to the next thought about what recommendations to ameliorate equity problems or constrained choice vis-a-vis good jobs do you suggest in New York specifically, or the US generally?
So in general, I think, and in New York, but in general, I think we have to actively consider equity and impact on people. It's not going to just happen. Like if people just expect that, okay, as long as we try to treat everybody equally, then equity will just happen, it won't happen. People have to sort of change the way they think about these things, the way they approach them. Counselors and teachers have to be much more mindful in terms of what kind of guidance they're given to Black, Latino, and other students from marginalized backgrounds. We need to rethink some of the entry-level coursework, for example, in colleges. Many of the STEM courses, beginning STEM courses in colleges are designed to be very competitive, which they have a great explanation for, but at, at the same time, that sort of much more culturally favors men, and it can deter many women from pursuing those STEM degrees and STEM pathways. Also, another something else to think about is incremental credentialing. So, giving people credit for completing even portions of the program, or even in some cases, there has been even modular courses where people are given credit for completing modules, and then they can come back and finish it, because life happens, and especially for older students, or students from lower income or marginalized communities, they are much more likely to face childcare issues and transportation issues and health issues and all other kinds of issues. So A, they need support services to help them deal with those issues, but B, they need to be able to get credit for the work they've done, for the learning they've done, and then be able to come back later on and continue their studies without having to start over.
That makes sense. I apologize for jumping in. I just see that we're starting a little behind.
Okay.
I want to make sure that the roundtable that's going to continue the discussion with the data you just presented has enough time. So I'm going to kick this over to my colleague, Amanda, who's going to jump us off into this roundtable.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we just got a great question in the chat. So Artem and Katherine, hope you might be able to address that question from Joe. But just want to thank our partners at Georgetown and Artem and Katherine for your research. We dug into it as soon as that report was published, and it has helped us greatly in thinking about our strategy moving forward. For our final segment of the day, we just wanted to bring it back to our inspiring partners at JobsFirstNYC. We really want to be thinking about our theme of Dream Up and how we are implementing the changes we want and need to see in New York City, how we're thinking about the data and recommendations from that report in our work, and how we are dreaming up new futures for our young adults. So we have two people to wrap us up for today. So Kim Mitchell is the Vice President of Strategy and Engagement at NPower, a national nonprofit rooted in community, committed to advancing race and gender equity in the tech industry by launching digital careers, creating pathways for prosperity for underserved people and communities. Kim has deep content knowledge and passion for a strong early care and learning system, educational and economic equity, community revitalization, and strategic philanthropy, and she uses her voice to amplify these issues for resolution. If you know her, you know that to be true. Thank you for being here, Kim. And Sunil Gupta, who is Vice President of the Division of Adult and Continuing Education at LaGuardia Community College, has 25 years of experience in higher ed. He joined LaGuardia in 2021 and has launched the Credits for Success initiative, a credits for prior learning collaborative effort to re-engage New York City students, and the Career Start program. Before LaGuardia, he was Dean of Adult Continuing Education and Workforce Development at Borough of Manhattan Community College from 2007 to 2021. Sunil is on the board of directors of Jobs First New York City. And these are personally my two of my partners in the Transfer to Career Collaborative, where we're working with high school students in New York City. So Kim and Sunil, so glad you're here. And let's kick it off with a kind of difficult question. You know, the report is talking about the constrained choices that some of our young adults face. We know that there is discrimination and bias in education and in workforce training and employment. And these can create barriers for young adults, even if they make quote unquote, the right choices for themselves. How can we address this with young adults so they can still be able to get and sustain a good job? Kim, would you kick us off?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much, Amanda, for this opportunity. And Sunil is our partner in this work across the years, and so I'm honored to join this conversation with him. And finally, bravo to Jobs First. This has been an amazing event and conversation, and really has inspired me in this work. But to your question, I mean, you know, we've been managing these constraints for many years. We are often presented with, in my view, a set of false choices. That is, one is more important or critical than the other. I've learned in philanthropy, there's no hierarchy of need, right? Need is need. Hunger, workforce, housing constraints are all challenges that we must, as a community, address. But in particular, as it relates to this research, what I believe is important is for us to continue to elevate and expand the services that we provide and the programs that we know are proven to break the mold, to disrupt these constraints, and to disrupt the system. And in addition to providing the career-connected and skills-based training for young people to be ready for those opportunities, we also have to continue to advocate for them, that we provide that agency, that we are the pathway and the influencers that present them to the job opportunities through our influence, and work with the employer partners across, in particular, New York City, in the way that we do, so that we can break the normal conventions and constraints that they use to exclude people. We have an expression in NPower where our program is designed to weave people in and not weed them out. And our job as influencers is to help ensure that we are breaking the mold, breaking through the doors and showing them that we have the talent that is able to contribute and help the young people through their preparation be able to walk through those doors and make the contributions that we know that they're capable of. And we just have to help move them and present them on their behalf.
Seems like an easy solution to just open the doors and stand back. Kim, Sunil, do you want to weigh in here about constrained choices?
Absolutely, and I want to echo Kim's sentiments. What a wonderful, wonderful day this has been, just tremendous, and pleasure to be here with Kim, my colleague. We're working on so many projects together. Yes. What I think is really interesting as we're dreaming up and looking at this, you know, this is not an isolated concept. This has been going on historically. We've been looking at it and trying to figure out how to impact change. And to be fair, a lot of credit to Jobs First for recognizing this early on in their research and their pilot program that they did in 2017 and is continuing to move forward with transfer to career collaboration. And also in 2019, the National Center for Education came up with very damaging statistics that indicated that BIPOC students of color, were not enrolling in STEM majors at large. And we know STEM majors have a critical impact and ability to lift individuals and families out of poverty, have the largest amount of opportunity for individuals to gain from. And what's really disconnected is the rigid space between K through 16 community colleges and workforce. There's so many ways that we could look and envision the future. And I think it's starting to happen now. You know, a lot of credit to the current administration. Our mayor is moving towards large strides, very bold strides, and very progressively. Many frameworks exist. One I'd like to highlight and look at that we don't adapt in New York City particularly, or in the CUNY schools, is the National Guided Pathways Framework, which really spells out an effective methodology based on 4 pillars of engaging students, setting a pathway, helping students identify the pathway for them, keeping them on it, and then making sure that they have meaningful gains at the end of that road. What we could envision conceptually, big picture thinking, is changing culture, changing the rigid culture that exists both in post-secondary education, in the K through 16 system, and use this opportunity and the urgency to start to move something that bridges the community colleges into the high school arena, maybe early on, well before they come in as a freshman in college and have no idea of the major to select, or are hit with a variety of social and cultural capital challenges that we're not prepared to resolve. And I think that this is a wonderful conversation. And I'm a real optimist about this. I think we are ready, and hopefully cultural change will lead to advocacy, and that will lead to policy change.
Feels like we're breaking down silos in this roundtable itself. And when we met with Kim, she said she was about to meet with Sunil. And when we met with Sunil, he said he just met with Kim. So I know that you both are committed to doing what we can to change this system. My next question is about the wealth gap. We heard a bit about from the Georgetown report. We know that college education is already so expensive and becomes increasingly so. How do we ensure that that young adults can get well-paying jobs, through earning credentials and developing their skills, or in other ways? Sunil, we can start with you.
Sure. I think this makes a really strong case for the goal of Workforce Pell, where workforce training programs, which for many of our members of our community are critical as they need to sustain themselves and their families, that should be step one. But again, that is not subsidized by any of the Pell or even TAP in New York State funding sources, which then means individuals have to make a very hard choice of trying to support and get training. Now, if there is Workforce Pell and those training programs carry credit for prior learning, when they're ready to take that leap back into an associate's degree and then eventually a bachelor's degree, they don't have to pay twice or be penalized twice to then retake those courses. They can leverage those learning outcomes towards their associate's degree. So I think that's part of the solution. Certainly subsidized higher education would be wonderful, but I think that would be one that both the federal government has been looking at, and under the Obama administration got very close to getting approved, but never quite was able to do it.
Yeah, the work that we do at NPower is really focused on this idea of creating pathways to prosperity. And we are focused on all tech all the time. And we believe and know that the tech industry represents not only the largest number of opportunities for jobs, and there is a huge demand for talent, but they're also the higher wage jobs. So as a workforce development practitioner, we're focused on not just the skills and credentials, but the job placements that then, where we've seen over the years, our data shows us that we're seeing an increase of upwards of 300% of the family income or of wages of our graduates, because they're being placed in jobs that tend to pay higher. And so that's part of the goal of us helping to close this gap. But I heard an expression some years ago, not years ago, a bit ago on a YouTube channel about something around sci-fi. It's not even something I'm really terribly interested in, but the expression was that we don't rise to the level of our goals, but we fall to the level of our systems. And we have been falling from a set of broken systems. And the work that we're doing and the work that we're partnering with other practitioners like the higher ed system is to better strengthen a system that creates a better bridge so that young people can make the choice to go to college and not have to worry about its affordability, but also not have to take a vow of poverty if that is not their choice, but that they want to go to work. And so our program is demonstrating ways to make young people able to be hired into a role that pays a wage that is beyond family sustaining wages, and then make the choice because they're either getting tuition reimbursement or they are able to afford that college education with greater interest and clarity about how to then take advantage of that opportunity and really persist and complete it so that they have opportunity for upward mobility as well.
Thank you for that, Kim and Sunil. And just building on what we're talking about, we know there are age-old problems of race and gender equity and all the other kinds of equity regarding good job access, what are the specific educational actions you suggest to counter that? And we think of, there was talk of what education means in the chat, and we don't just think of formal education, but all the kinds of education that you provide. Kim.
You know, I think that we have reached a point that, you know, it's all about credentials. Yes, it's about providing access, but we also need to lead with the data. And we need to demonstrate to the total ecosystem, including the employer community, that the things that they're saying about not being able to find talent, not being able to find a talent of color is simply not accurate. And so we have published a report called The Equation for Equality, for example. And what we've been able to do is use data and research to present to the entire ecosystem the fact that there are 2.5 million women of color in the workforce. And when the tech industry says where women of color are the least represented, less than 5%, that they can't find women of color and that they're not qualified for the jobs. This study shows that women of color are in plain sight. And there is an equation for equality that suggests that they are in jobs that have skills similar, transferable capability to then succeed in tech jobs. So we believe using data and research is important. And then we need to set the table and convene the full ecosystem of partners so that we're having real discussions about how to fill those gaps. And we're helping guide them to be able to identify the talent that is available to fill those jobs, to make higher wages, and to also ensure that the women of color themselves know that these opportunities are available and know that they have the capacity and the capability to succeed and compete for those jobs.
Thank you. What are your thoughts, Sunil? What educational actions should we be taking?
I think there's a lot of room and a lot of opportunity, and I won't spend too much time talking about guided pathways, but I think that would be one if we had a significant system-wide approach with all the institutions within the larger system of CUNY adopting a guided pathway approach so all students can get clarity and understanding from day one all the way through the process and not sort of spot opportunities or like type programs. But more importantly, looking at community colleges, we have long maintained kind of dual missions of either preparing individuals and communities for either workforce or associate degree attainment. And the problem here is that we don't look at all students as a student. We need to look at them as a student and which every door to our institution leads to some sort of equitable opportunity. And that's where the change needs to begin from day one. We're trying to adopt that. We're moving towards this culture at LaGuardia Community College, what we're calling a one college culture, where every opportunity to engage with the student can lead to some opportunity of equity, employment, and degree attainment. It's a long hill. It's a long way up that hill to move that. But again, through support and through forums like this, we can start to inform and change and advocate for this drastic change. And additionally to that, we have an opportunity now to really call out what we want to do, but there has to be budget and financial support behind these changes. The vision is there. A vision without a funding source is a hallucination. So we need that real reality. We need to come together, change culture, push for policy change, and get the funding to support the change.
Thank you. I'm going to move us to our last question of the day, and we love a lightning round here at JobsFirstNYC. So just bringing it back to our theme and how we make this not just a hallucination, but a reality. What will it take to not only dream up, but create the world we want for our young adults, by and for young adults? How do you each see the year, maybe just the year ahead? How do you see us implementing some of the solutions we've talked about today? Sunil?
Well, I think that there exist numerous networks. I think collaboration is critical, and also trying to see how we can do away with some redundancy and pulling together all the stakeholders across the city, stakeholders from city agencies, state agencies, CBO partners, and really come together comprehensively and to start to address these issues. As we all take off on different projects, sometimes the impact is not there for the larger community. If we come together, that network, Jobs First is an amazing resource in bringing us all together. I think more of these opportunities are key.
Yeah, a couple of things. We are focused on 4 strategic pillars for the future, and I think they make sense in this conversation. And the first is to continue to create seamless transitions from the K-12 system to the workforce system, and ensure that we are making access to skills, career information, interests, and abilities earlier in the life of young people, so that they're able to make choices that are more freeing and that are giving them greater life outcomes. We also need to expand the learning pathways and continue to find different ways to reach young people and reach communities that are low wealth communities so that they have access to opportunities for skilling. And then we need to just continue to drive systems change so that we can really move things from community to opportunity. We want to stay and be rooted in community, much like the work of Jobs First, and demonstrate that there's opportunity and that there's ownership. We also have to believe that communities that are low wealth communities and the people of color in them, and the young adults in particular, can be successful. And we have to help them believe that it's a place that they belong, and success is as much for them as it is for others that they see. And then finally, this idea of what I heard in a masterclass on Black history, freedom, and love is to be love warriors. That we have to approach this with the belief, the love of our community and the people in them, and that we want to create opportunity and engagements and systems for all people, not just some. And so this dream up is this idea of believing the dream that is made for you. And we want to help young people believe that the past doesn't have a future, but they do.
Thank you so much on ending with love, Kim. And we have so much love for both of you and the work that you do in New York City and in the world. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.